that you made. And I think you have this range of stories in this that really do span the spectrum of a kind of ideologically interesting, you know, controversial, pop, funny. I mean, you inject a lot of different things into this. Where did all this come from? Was it planned that way, or is it fortuitous? Guys?
Well, it's a little bit of a combination of both, I think. I think some of it was planned. I think it's important to note that a film like this doesn't come into existence without a person like Chad Troutwine. I mean, he happened to be the person with the vision to put it together as an omnibus feature, but he also had, you know, he's a successful entrepreneur. He had the means to get it started. He financed the lion's share of this movie, and you know, without that kind of a commitment to a project like this, without seeing it through all the way, it just doesn't happen. You know, I mean, this isn't the kind of film you could take to a studio and have someone get in a pitch. I mean, it's just not. And so, you know, there was a combination of the right people.
You wrote the check. You can
stop. No, but I'm serious. I mean, we agree. We all agree.
I think it's a miracle whenever we get together.
Questions, comments? There are mics up here. You can either come to the mic, or someone can, if they're really nice, can bring the mic to you. Go ahead.
Hi, I have a question about the can you bribe a ninth grader? How did you go about choosing which students to profile? And I was really hoping at the end of your segment for an update on how the students are doing. Could you fill us in?
Well, we had decided to do this. The experiment ran over the course of a year, but everything wasn't in place for us to get going on the segment until about December. And so what we did was, to make it fair, we agreed with Levitt and his co-authors, John List, that we would find kids that were new to the project. So those kids had all transferred in from other schools. So it made it at least, you know, it was at the beginning for them. You know, that's why it starts in January. Of course, the numbers in the end that you see represent the entire year of the experiment. So basically, Sally, the economist with the red hair, who ran the program, she had to interview and introduce the program to, like, you know, 30 kids one day. We went over those 2 days to those schools, and we just filmed her explaining to all the kids and seeing if they wanted to be part of the project. And, you know, your rail jumped out immediately, obviously, hook, line, and sinker. I was like, you're in. Let's call your mom and see if she'll let you be in a movie. It was literally like, let's call your mom and talk to her. And then Kevin, I mean...
If you don't use the mom in the trailer, you guys are crazy.
Right.
It's like, I'm telling you,
Isn't she
did
great?
you read the book? Just start off with that.
Honestly, and you know, she's interesting because obviously the kid whose parent was most involved in riding him the hardest does better. And that's not a coincidence either, and I'm sure people understood that, but I think that speaks volumes. In any case, Kevin was the biggest delinquent I've ever met in my life, and I've met a lot of delinquents because we did a lot of films with kids, and we love delinquents, and he really thought, we thought, God, if this kid can turn around, then wow, this is amazing if he can turn around. Well, didn't turn around, but he was very entertaining, and I don't know, I just think people can identify with both of those kids in some level. So we cast it in that sense. We just sat there for 2 days and we're like, let's go with these two. And usually we have like 2 or 3 safeties. When we do our films, we'll film like 5 or 6 kids and then we won't drop them until the end. But it was a 20-minute segment. We really felt strongly about these 2 kids, so we only actually followed them. And we just went with our gut. And luckily it turned out they each had a different result. And you know, I think that we got a little bit lucky as well.
Questions? Just could someone run the mic, or someone get up to the mic, please? Thank you.
Thanks. The film is fascinating, and thank you very much all. I find it very interesting that Kevin and Urail turns out to be the guy with the black name who becomes a big success, and that Kevin is, you know, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
There are a lot of very interesting and kind of distinctive synapses that are formed in this film. Both in the interstitials and in the individual segments. My question is, when you speak about Honai and Takame, and you look at this film as a documentary, how do you, I'm trying to figure out how to pose this question because it's a little bit complicated, but how do you deal with the difference between documentary as observational of truth and this documentary which has a very strong thesis component? You're doing a documentary on what is essentially a thesis. That's the question, I guess. And that's probably a question that comes out of.
The answer before you start shooting.
Eugene, you should answer that because you adapted directly from the book.
You had me at one eye.
I think the question is a very fundamental one about making documentaries per se, but I think the idea that you're ever not working from some sort of thesis is a mythology that was promoted by people, I think, with an illusory idea of how documentaries are made. I think there's objective pieces of art almost without exception. I would find it hard to find one. I couldn't find the subjectivity. And having said that, I don't know that in this case of this film that we were really looking at a thesis, partly because it's broken up into several theses maybe, but even along those lines, with the exception maybe of mine, of the segment I did about abortion and crime, the other ones are very much about their process, I find. They're very process-based. Mine is the one that is probably the most thesis-driven. And again, as I said, I tried to create a medium for that to basically set it apart and say, I'm not them. The reason mine starts with this ridiculous Department of Freakonomics door and ends with it was to put those guys behind that door, particularly in case it gets disproven. The next year or two, I can say, well, it was their idea. That's a joke of a serious thought, which is mine. And I also chose a narrator who was not myself, so that I wasn't saying, in the particular case of mine, because the thesis is so grave, I'm taking a position here, I have a dog in this race. I was saying this is told as an urban parable about America, a sort of an urban fable or an urban truth about crime in our country and how it works and what its roots are, and it was meant to put it in their analysis and in their method.
I just have an 18-part question. I was just curious how you chose which variables to look at with the names, and African American kids and white kids, just because there's so many other factors like religion and obviously mixed children, and also the upper echelons, and then just also in terms of what market you're aspiring to. If you're aspiring to be a filmmaker, having an individual name or wearing sneakers is great, and if you're wanting to be a banker, it might not be.
It's a Saturday. Give me a break. Come on. I wish.
No, I did not mean it that way.
No. I'm sure you should. So, Morgan Spurlock made the names piece, so I don't know if we should speak for him, directly, but I thought, I will say this, Morgan interpreted the chapter on names, I thought, very much by the book, with a couple of exceptions that I thought were really good and interesting. In terms of, I could talk forever about names, but it would be really boring, because really what we did with the name, okay, so what happened is, Roland Fryer, who you saw in the names piece, who also, interestingly, for those of you who care about Heidi and Rachel's piece, which I think is everybody, because it's a great piece,